Hello, friends. Welcome back to Gym Philosophy in the Afternoon. Running a little bit late today, a little bit last minute, so not sure if we're going to have a big crew or not, but we've already got Garrick in the house. We got Blue Rose Lion in here. Hello, guys. Welcome to the chat. Going to talk about emotional work in D&D. Game Masters do have to do a certain amount of emotional work to keep the game together, I think. This is my thesis for today. I want to talk about this. We got Pan Piper in the chat. We've got Ludus Dominus in the chat. Hello, everybody. Great to see you. This is a great day today, guys. It's the day that I went grocery shopping, which is also always great. Getting them fresh tomatoes and avocados. We've got Stuart in the chat. How's it going, Stuart? We got Aretha Co in here. Going, everybody. Okay, so here's my thesis on this. Okay, I believe that game masters need to do some emotional work to keep their campaigns going. If they do not, then it's going to be it's going to be a situation where their campaigns are more likely to burn out. We've got Juobuzz in the chat. How's it going, Juobuzz? Welcome to the chat. So here's what I'm talking about. During the week, I get a lot of mechanics and gameplay messages from my players, right? And this is pretty, you can pretty much expect this. You're going to get messages, things like, hey, I was thinking about taking this feat. What do you think? Or, hey, can I, between sessions purchase this, weapon or whatever, just like, this kind of stuff. But I also get messages like, did you hear what so-and-so said during the game? That really bothered me. What do you think about that? Or like, I get messages from people saying like, I can't stand so-and-so, like one of the other players, like, oh, like, why did he do that? Or I'll get players being like, saying even things like, I feel like you don't like my character. Do you like my character? Like, do you like what they're doing? Right. So I get some of these messages. Now it's very obvious right away. Okay. That some players are more likely to send messages like this than others. I've got some players who've literally, like, I categorize these messages into two different categories. So there are messages that are like mechanical, right? Or they're about kind of the story of the character or whatever, right? So they're like narrative, gameplay, or mechanics type questions. And then there's like emotional support kind of questions. And so these are the two categories of questions I get throughout the week. There are some players who have literally never sent me, like, I would say, an emotional support sort of question. And by the way, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but this is what I want to talk about. I don't think a lot of game masters realize this, and I just want to discuss this, and I want to raise awareness for this because I think that it's a good thing for game masters to understand, and I've done a lot of thinking about this. Okay, so when let's see, Stuart says, do you give the players feedback on their characters, gameplay, and compliment? I do that. Never receive those types of questions. No, sometimes I don't probably do a very good job of that. I try to, but the truth is I could probably give more of those types of compliments. So that's always a good thing to remember that. And that kind of leads into this. Garrick says, Blue Rose Lion, I'm still working on that temple, but that's a different thing. Paul says, I'll send you an emotional support message. I got you. Dave says, hi, it's me. I'm the problem. It's me, Taylor Swift. Okay, so now with that being said, Stuart raises a good point, which we're going to get into here for a minute. Let's see. I'm just looking at these chat questions. Soccer's people grind among themselves. It's just life. Pan Piper, I fish for compliments here in the chats. Okay, so here is what I mean. Okay, there are some players who never really send these kinds of messages, and so it's like, and there's a point to where sometimes those players, those are a little challenging in a different way, because sometimes it's like there can be a temptation to think, well, do they care? Like, do they care enough? Are they having fun? Is that why they're not sending these types of questions? But I've learned over the years of running games that no, just some people are different people. They just do different things, and they think differently, and they care about different things. Okay. And also there's just people who are in different places in life, and this is going to affect the way they engage in D&D. Okay. So then there are people who send kind of more emotional questions. Okay. So when players said this. There's a good element to this in that I do enjoy talking about these things with the player characters. I really do. um, and I would call that like an emotional work element of the social and creative dynamic of running games. And I think that's I think that it is difficult for some GMs to handle this. I think that if you start to run a lot of games, which I'm running 5 pro games right now, going very, very well, have really solid, awesome players. I do have some players who send me, kind of more emotional type messages during the week, discussing things, Now, some of these could accurately be described as community management messages, right? Because what a game master is doing when they are running a professional game um, is they are actually offering a community to their players. They're offering a table, and what players are actually paying for is to gain access to that table because they believe it'll be high enough value to be worth it. Right? They want to engage in the hobby at that level. Now, you're also managing a community when you run games for your friends and family. There's no business aspect to it, but it's still a community organizational thing. So some of these messages could be described as community organization, messages. Um, and so, with that being said, I guess it's more like there are 2 categories in this kind, and so there's like the type of message about this organization. So it's like, well, how is so and so going to work, or what do you typically do with this, or like just that aren't really related to the mechanics of the game or the story, but are more related to interpersonal dynamics. Maybe sometimes it's about annoying players get annoyed by other players and they might talk about it or whatever. And then sometimes though you have those messages that are like, do you like my character? Do you think I'm doing this right? I'm afraid that everyone else doesn't like my character. A lot of times it comes down to these types of questions, and sometimes it's like, I really hate so and so, can you like make them stop doing XYZ? So these kinds of questions. Okay. And those kind of sometimes border on the line between community organization queries and concerns, and sometimes they're more like kind of emotional support questions almost. I one time had someone tell me that I should hire an HR person because of I do get a lot of messages about these things every week. So now here's the thing. Uh, I think I am by nature a pretty good HR person. I mean, to a pretty big extent. I enjoy hearing people's concerns. I'm not happy that they have concerns, right? But I am comfortable listening. I'm pretty good at like not taking it personally, I guess, if there's like a complaint or something. I'm pretty good at keeping, I would say, my feelings out of the mix and just kind of listening and trying to understand the problem so that we can try to fix it. And ultimately that's what I want to do with these types of things is fix these kind of problems. Okay. However, I do think that it's important for game masters to know, and this is what I believe is true. It's important for game masters to know that there is going to be a certain amount of this work to be done, and you really need to do it. I think you really need to do it well. I think you need to try your very best to navigate these things with seriousness and to make them a priority. And I think that if you notice that it's happening so much that it's starting to kind of like, I mean, it adds up to actual, real, like extra work. And when I say extra work, I mean spending time on it, it's like spending time doing it. Because it does take time to have a conversation over Discord. It takes time to exchange messages. I think that I have talked to some GMs who express, that's stuff I'm not getting paid for. If it's a pro GM, it's like, that's time I'm not getting paid for. That's time, like, I don't have time for it. Like, I can only do so much. Right. So I've heard some GMs say, I really have to limit that because, I just literally can't afford the time. And I've talked to some GMs who have literally said, I don't want that to be my problem. Like I've talked to some GMs who say things like this. Now, I don't know what the vast majority of GMs think about this. I can only speak to like my experiences and the GMs I've literally talked to about this, which has only been like a handful. But I believe that number one, the more games you run, the more likely you are to have this build up as a serious weekly time investment. I spend, I definitely spend hours. I mean, like more than 2 hours, maybe more than 3 hours a week, just fielding player messages for sure, like without a doubt. It's almost adds up to a whole nother game session. And that's not on top of prep, right? That prep is separate. That's other work I'm putting in, right? That has nothing to do with post game, like house cleaning, things like, uploading the transcripts and, doing all that stuff. It's just extra work that goes into it, right? And this goes back to how when you're running pro games, the economics get very challenging with these things. But it's really important, I think, to take it into account that doing this work with your players, responding to messages, even being a listening ear when players feel like maybe bad about something, or when they feel they're feeling negative, or they're feeling anxious, or they're worried about something, having a listening ear, being a generally good human. And the way that I like to characterize this is, I don't like to think of it like I don't like to think of myself as like an HR person. What I like to think of it is that I have this community space, my game table, and people come into the space to enjoy the communication, or to enjoy the hobby, and communication is a very important part of this. Okay. Um, Now, with that being said, uh, is sorry, there's so many good comments coming through. I'm getting a little distracted by the comments. I want to respond to all the comments that are coming through, but I'm going to hold off for just a minute, and I'll get back to them here in just a second. But I'm inviting people into the space, and I am interacting with them, and so it's like, I think of it like, in D&D terms, think of it like a fantasy temple, like a refuge. People can come here to partake of the religion of D&D, right? And I am like the minister, who kind of puts together the service, right? And then I act as a sort of church manager as the players go on their spiritual journey. But instead of a spiritual journey, it's a creative journey. But this is a pretty good metaphor, I think. Okay. And the way that I like to think of player concerns is, I like to think of it like this. This is how I try to characterize it to myself. When a player has a concern, or they want to talk about something, I will invite them. I will invite them in. If like they message me, I think about this as me inviting them in, maybe making a cup of tea and making time to sit down with them and say, tell me what's on your mind, friend. What's on your mind? Let's talk about it. I care. I want to hear it. Let's see what we can figure out. Right. So this is how I try to approach this. So I'm not trying to approach it from an HR perspective. I'm trying to approach it from a human perspective, right? Because I think that when we are running games, our players also deserve that respect of us talking on equal footing. It's not like, I'm in charge, maybe I'll listen to your complaint. It's like, that's certainly not the approach we want to take, I don't think. I think we want to take the approach of, we both have our different roles in this ecosystem of the creative experience of telling the stories of these characters. Let's come together over like a cup of tea, in the nice quiet tranquility of the temple here, and let's talk about it, right? So in other words, actually making time, not just shooting messages off while you're parked at the stoplight, or while you're trying to do other things, like just kind of trying to get them to like appease them just enough that you get through it. I don't think that that's the right approach. I think we need to actually make time for it, and that's why I'm making this video. The reason I'm making this video is because I think that when game masters start to run like more than one game or more than two games, okay, when you start getting higher up there and you start gaming with more and more people, it is more and more likely that you're gonna have different communication needs with your players, and that they're going to need more, and it's going to be directly in your best interest, and it's going to be directly healthy for your table to have those conversations with the players and spend the time doing it if you want them to stay, if you want to build real community, if you want to build actual real relationships, okay? Because it's kind of like building friendships with people. when they come into your gaming space, this isn't just a business transaction. If you're running pro games, if they're your friends and family, this isn't just like a library activity. At least I don't think it is. I think that it very quickly naturally lends itself to deeper relationships than just that. It's definitely more on par with like friendship. And it's almost on par with like coworkers. How you know how when you go through the same things, you have all these shared experiences that you share together, and it adds a lot of depth to relationships. I think that playing D&D is like that. We have these shared experiences of the narratives of the table, right? um, so uh, with that being said, I think that I am fortunate. There's something about my maybe it's my genetics or maybe my psychology. There's something about me that makes it pretty easy for me to set aside the time. In fact, if I'm not careful, um, I'll probably spend too much time responding to messages, and then I will get behind on other things, which, to be really honest, has definitely happened like this week, and it happened last week. I know that it has happened because I am actually legit behind, like on a lot of work. um, so, with that being said, uh, it is it is how can I say this? I think it's good for my game master journey that I have this inside of me. And I do believe that this is a good thing for other game masters who maybe aren't as naturally suited to it to cultivate a little bit at their tables. Okay, man, that was harder to get through than I thought. That was basically my thesis. Now I want to talk about some of these other. I want to share some of these comments here. There's some really good comments here. I do want to let you know if you want to build actual emotional buy-in at your tables, you want to hear my deepest thoughts about how to do that. Have a table where players will want to come back again and again to your games. I did write a book on this called The Advanced Art of TTRPG Game Mastery. If you haven't grabbed this, you can grab it. Links in the description for about the price of a cup of coffee. You can hear how I build emotional investment with my players at the table, like in game. Now, what we're talking about right now is outside of game, but inside game is very important. Now, for outside the game and for running for the business part of it, I've actually written a book called The GM Philosopher's Paid GM Guidebook. For about the price of 2 cups of coffee, you can learn how I built my pro GM business using Start Playing and how I maintain it, how I keep players engaged and keep the business running while also staying true to the craft. You can find all my very important kind of like experiences and things I've learned over the process in this book. 142 pages of value in there. So if you want to go the pro GM route, that is the book for you. So those books help me to fund GM philosophy, which is the mission of this channel is to empower game masters to run better games. I didn't really give that intro at the beginning. I got right into it because my mind was busy. All right, I want to respond to some of these comments here. Okay. Stuart says, do you give the players feedback on their characters? Gameplay and compliments. I do that. Never receive those types of questions. So I do try to do that, Stuart. Of course, I could probably do better at this. I could totally do better. We could always do better at this, right? And now I will also say, running 5 games a week, it is very, unfortunately, there is a tendency for me to fall behind on that. Super strong tendency. I should do better. You're correct about that. Okay, let's see here. Now, I've already read some of these. Buzz says, how do you approach a problem player when you play among friends? This is very hard. I just have a personal conversation with them. It's like, dude, what are you doing? Why are you acting like a clown? Stop it. I love you. Like, you got to quit. We're trying to play a game here, right? In private. That's how I handle it. Hopefully, when we have a good, honest, heart-to-heart talk in love, that'll solve the problem. When a lot of times, you just have to talk about it, guys. My dog is barking in the background. I think the mailman is outside, which is very dangerous. The dogs are very concerned about the mailman. Dave Imagination says, the concern is that there are a lot of options, a lot of different games that people could play, and instead, you'd hate to lose someone because of a personal conflict. Oh no, totally. Yeah. You would hate to lose someone for personal conflict, but I don't want personal conflicts to happen anyway. like I'm by nature, I'm an Enneagram type 3. I'm the achiever. And there's a very strong element of my personality that is performance based in the eyes of other people. One of the biggest metrics that matters to me in my psyche, deep in my personality and my motivations, is the drive to want people to see me as successful. And no matter how hard I try to disengage from that, there is an element of that deep in my psyche. And this makes me want to solve conflicts naturally. I'm by nature not a person who likes to start conflicts, and I like to make sure they get ended. And I try to always end them on a positive note. I always try to leave the door open to that, which sometimes is its own problem. But anyway, okay, let's see here. Dirty Sock says communication is key. It totally is. Stewart says 3 hours just on player concerns. Wow. How many players divided by 3 hours equals time spent per player? Are there higher need players taking up most of the time? It's certainly so that's a good question. It is definitely like a Pareto distribution. Like there are I would say maybe 70% of the players, we barely exchange messages at all. And then the curve really goes up. We're like with about 25% of players, I exchange many messages and we have lots of back and forth and stuff like that. So that is, I mean, it may not always be 3 hours, but there are weeks where it is definitely 3 hours. I have spent 3 hours in a single day before fielding intense player conversations. It's not always like that though. Some weeks are way more chill, and sometimes it depends on the player, right? I one time had a player who was literally in my game for 1 week. He played 2 sessions, and the number of messages I exchanged with him was so big, like it dwarfed everything else. Like it was literally that week alone with him, I spent over 3 hours exchanging messages just with him because he had so many emotions about it, and then he ended up leaving anyway. So anyway, then it's like, oh, so it was a little bit unsuccessful, but I mean, it is what it is. You can't please everybody. Buzz says, I'm just curious what kind of messages people send you. Reveal as much as you feel like. So people send messages about things like, what they'd like to do with their character, ideas for future story arcs, stat questions like, hey, what do you think about me taking levels in this next time? Would this fit with the story and stuff like that? How much would it cost to buy this magic item and things like that, right? By the way, I'm not trying to say that I don't like getting messages from players. I am happy that players talk to me about stuff. It makes me very happy that they are engaged and invested in the story. This video is to talk about this to other game masters and to encourage them to take it seriously and to actually schedule time to do it. That's what the purpose of this video is. So I'm not complaining about characters sending me or players sending me messages, by the way. But like, okay, so, and then, sometimes I actually get a surprising number of messages that are like, I was really annoyed with so-and-so other player at the session. They do this and that. What do you think? Or sometimes it's like, can you do something about it? Or like, and those are difficult because a lot of times what actually happens is someone will say something about another player that like rubs them the wrong way. But I am not at all rubbed the wrong way by that player. So that is very hard to navigate because it's like I'm dealing with a set of feelings about it that I do not possess. And I legitimately, I like all of my players. I think it's once someone becomes a player in one of my games, it becomes pretty difficult for me to dislike you. Like it's going to be very hard for you to I don't know, make me dislike you. Because it just creates a soft place in my heart for you when you're in one of my games. So even if there are things that maybe a player does that I'm like, maybe it's a little like frustrating or grates on my nerves or something. It's not really ever a big deal. It's like almost never a big deal. So those are hard conversations for me. Sometimes I get messages about like people are concerned about things like so-and-so was doing this in the game today. Could we get together and talk about how this might play out next session? Because I'm concerned that if they do this and that, then this or that might happen, right? So I get those kind of messages sometimes. Those are not as common, but they have been kind of common lately, just because there have been a lot of like morally complex situations in my games lately. So that kind of brings up things like that. Let's see what else. I get, let me think if there's any other. I get questions about storyline points a lot. People want to like develop abilities with their storyline points. So they send me those, but those are more like mechanics questions, right? But they still take up time, right? They still take time. Let's see here. Dirty Socks says 3 hours per week, Josh, on communication with your players. Yeah, no, sometimes. I mean, not every single week. Sometimes it's more. Sometimes it's definitely more. Stewart says 3 hours is a lot. Maybe time to set expectations, how much time you can set aside for outside game conversations. You don't want it to be zero, but 3 hours, wow. I mean, if we stretch 3 hours out over a 7 day week, what is that? That's like, if we split it up, I don't know, what does it come out to, like 20 minutes a day or something like that? Which sounds about right. That's even maybe conservative. Um, Garrick says, allow them the presumption that, however it seems to you, it must be important to them or they wouldn't bring it up. I agree, 100%. I think that's true. Dirty Sock says, well, being it divided all over the players does not feel a lot. He has basically 5 games with 6 players. Yeah, basically, give or take. Some players, though, are playing in multiple games too. Paul says, taking time to respond and listen to player helps player turnover, I would bet. I have done my best not to message you and respect your time unless I thought it was absolutely necessary. Well, Paul, I mean, you don't message me hardly at all, and you could totally message me more if you want. I like getting messages from my players. This is not a complaint. I have to really reiterate. I'm not complaining about this. I'm talking about how this is a crucial thing that I think game masters should pay attention to because it will help their games be better. Pan Piper says, I can easily write multiple paragraphs of ideas or thoughts about a game to a GM. I am not, however, expecting the GM to spend huge amounts of time responding. A single sentence from the GM acknowledging the message is more than enough, sufficient to know that it has been read and considered. So that's very understanding of you. However, generally when people send me a paragraph, if I only send a sentence back, that feels to me like it could very easily be construed as I like don't care or I'm just sweeping it aside. I try to actually engage with messages when they get sent, like fully, which means at least typing some sentences or maybe a paragraph explaining it. Sometimes I'll voice to text stuff. Anyway, but Pan Piper, super good insight there. Very, very good insight. Dirty Socks says, well, I skipped down too far. Okay, here we go. Dirty Sock says that means if they are all different players, which is not, there are a couple people, multiple games, but I think it is not a lot. So about True 11 says so about 6 minutes per player per week. I mean, if that's the math, yeah, totally. So which actually now doesn't sound like it sounds like. I mean, it's definitely not like it's so easy to spend 6 minutes fielding questions with one player in a week. Like it would definitely be more than that. It feels like. Stewart says, valid at Dirty Socks. That would add up to only about 6-10 minutes tops per player if it's all the players. My guess is probably only some of the players. Dirty Socks says, make the equation to a business. You can consider them a bit as coworkers. 3 hours a week for about 20 to 30 people is not a lot. No, I agree. And once again, I'm not complaining. I feel like the direction of these comments went to dissecting, dissecting how much time, which I really appreciate, but that's not really my concern. I'm not really concerned about that. Jewel Buzz says, Pan Piper, I personally can't remember the last time I got an idea from a player. It's both annoying, but also cool because the players show they care. Yeah, no, it is nice that they show they care. Dirty Socks says, it also depends on the total hours you work. Knowingly, Josh works more than 40 hours a week. It is less than you suspect. It is kind of a business deal where you are maintaining your contacts, which is necessary. So that's another thing is this with business. So it's the thing about D&D is that it's not just a business transaction. It's a creative, collaborative endeavor, right? And so since it is a creative and collaborative endeavor, there's an element to where you cannot apply typical business rules to it. I feel like if you try to apply typical business rules to it, then you're going to start to lose some of the creative collaboration that goes on between you, right? That's how I feel about it. In other words, that's why I don't say something like, I will only respond to 3 messages per week from each player or something. Or I designate 5 minutes per person to field questions. Like I don't apply those kinds of limits or metrics right now because I feel like it makes the process of creating together some stronger when we have that collaborative back and forth, right? About whatever it is. Now, in the future, I may do things like set business hours and schedule time every day and just put the conversations in a queue. I haven't been quite that organized about it yet. But I'm trying to get more organized about it. Crossheart says, "Have you seen the IT crowd show? The rescan episode where they use D&D to help one of the characters get over an X." Oh, I've not seen that, but I think I've seen clips of it. Mike Bell's in the house says, "Made it." Duo Buzz says, "Call me Sakis." Oh, Sakis, nice. How do you approach problem players? I'm not super confrontational. I hate HR and hate to be HR. Problem players, I very rarely have problem players in my games these days. If the most problems I ever have these days is I don't think there's a problem with a player, but one of the other players has a problem with a player, and then navigating that is hard. I'm going to be honest, that's hard to navigate. And generally, what I try to do is I try to talk and listen to the person, and I really try to figure out if there's actually a problem. Like, in other words, is this player actually behaving badly, or is this just a conflict of personalities? And then I'll just say it like it sounds like you just like it's not it doesn't sound like they're doing anything bad in the game. It sounds like you just don't like them as a person. Maybe they annoy you or you don't like the way they D&D. That's more what kind of things I deal with now. If I were to have an actual problem player, I would just message them and set up a meeting and talk about it in a kind and respectful way. It's like, here's what I think is going on. Here's what I think the problem is. That kind of thing. So anyway, that's how I would handle it, Sakis. Flip out says, never occurred to me to communicate that much with the GM. I just assume everyone just goes back to their lives between sessions. I think that some players are like that, totally. And then some are more communicative than others. I personally tend to be the type who I like to advocate for myself when I'm a player. So I will send the GM kind of my plans for next session between sessions, but I never, I would say, I feel like I never require like any kind of like emotional work when I'm a player. It's more like generally all mechanics and story stuff. So I'll send it to the GM. I'll be like, just letting you know this is important to me, whenever you get to it. That's kind of how I do it. So I would call that middle of the line, right? Some players don't do that. Some do a lot more than that. I like it when players talk to me about what they want their arcs to be, what they want their story to be. Part of the whole reason that I did this crossover event that I just did with Dr. Julia Prism was because Xochi's character, Charlie, like he was talking to me about Charlie's backstory and was like, I was thinking that maybe like a villain from his past who come to the future. And then we were talking about this and we talked about his character had dated Dr. Julia in college, and that was what started that whole process, that creative process. So that all spun from a player's backstory. And if we hadn't talked about that, we wouldn't have had that cool arc, right? So I love it when players do this. I just think GMs need to be aware of it. They need to be aware of the benefits of it, and they should probably schedule a reasonable amount of time to field it and actually pay attention to it. Okay, so let's see here. Mike Bell says, flip out. My Discord for my 2 free games is quite active between sessions. Crossheart says, you also have to remember the DM is a player too. They aren't responsible for everyone's happiness. It should be something the whole group works through together. So this is very true. And I think that GMs also need to let themselves off the hook. You can't make everybody happy. You can't please everybody. Some players are just some players are just not going to be happy with the other players. And there might not be anything you can do about that. Some players are just not going to be happy with your performance as a GM, and there may not be anything you can do about it. And that is okay. It's okay to say, I don't think I can help you, man. I think this may not be the best game for you, to be honest. That is a super fair thing to say if you think it's the right thing and if you think it's honest. Now, pro GMs will be afraid of that because they don't want to lose that money. But that's a scarcity mindset. The minute you start worrying about the money like that, it goes to a gross place, in my opinion. This is why I want to call them pro games, not paid games. Paid games focuses on the money. Don't focus on the money. Focus on the game. Focus on doing it professionally first. And then if you do that right, you won't have to worry about the money. It'll just sort itself out because people will be willing to, pay the price for entering this private community that you're fostering at the table, right? So be careful about that. Be careful about telling players they're not a good fit because you're afraid of losing the money. That will spoil a whole table very quickly. And it'll ruin your fun too. And you have to have fun. If the GM isn't having fun, it's not going to work. The business ain't going to work. This is not going to work. Dave's Imagination says, what do you think of sending a survey to your players to get their thoughts? It could be considered soliciting post-game discussion. I think that that's actually a really good idea. I do on occasion do things like that, but I've never actually deployed something like that. I have lately been thinking about sending out a survey though. It's just, that you can really never go wrong by finding creative ways to have a dialogue with your player characters, like with your players. You can never go wrong doing it. There is a balance to it. You don't want to create problems that aren't there. And I also think that sometimes if the GM tries too hard at that, it's like shaking the player, tell me what you think, it can come off as a little desperate and strange. Sometimes a little separation between the GM and players is good, I think, a little bit. Like, actually, I think that can be a healthy thing. It also maintains a bit of mystique. I think that's a healthy thing, right? Because the players, there's an element of you as a GM that should remain a bit of a mystery. Like the creative part of it should remain a bit of a mystery to the players. This helps, I think, immersion. That's actually an honest thing. I don't know if I've ever said that out loud before, but I do think that's a real thing. Anyway, Flip Out says, it's not that I'm opposed to it or anything. I would actually like to info dump every now and then. Just didn't want to spam people. I think there are a lot of people who think the way that you do, Flip Out, and they don't want to do that. However, you should know, I like getting messages from my players. I sometimes I'll even have to respond to people and say, hey, I saw this. I really care about this. I am very busy. Like, I will get back to you maybe tomorrow about this. Like, sometimes I do that just because it literally does build up sometimes, but I love to hear it. I love to get the messages. And I love to schedule the time to sort through them, right? Mike Bell says, Dave, I use polls to get feedback on things I'm potentially planning. The last one was about splitting the group in 2 separate missions. The answer from players was yes. Yeah, this is very smart. Stuart says 14 watching, 4 likes, YouTube juice. Everyone smash that thumbs up button for me. Give me that algorithm juice. Let's get GM philosophy on the map. Thank you all so much. And thank you for coming to the live stream, guys. Crossheart says it's also important for the players to address their issues with each other interpersonally. Maybe not at the table, but if it's problems with the players, they should talk it out. So that's actually true. And I think there are times when the GM needs to say that. I think that there are times when so let's say that a player has a problem with another player and they bring it up to the GM. I think that if you figure out that that player's not behaving badly, it's just a personality conflict. I think that you need to be brave enough as a GM to say, look, man, I love you so much, but I'm going to be honest. I don't see that player doing anything wrong. I think that you are just personally annoyed. And honestly, I don't think it's right for me to say something to them. But when they haven't done anything wrong, I think this is between you and them, not me and them. I don't think this is a community organization issue. I think this is a 2 humans need to talk issue. I think that is a very reasonable thing to say sometimes. I think that it is super okay to come to that conclusion if that's the honest conclusion. Now, with that being said, don't just jump to that conclusion and farm away the responsibility if there is a player causing some kind of problems, right? Saka says, what about 4 players having a problem with the 5th? That is a little different. That is a little bit different. And honestly, if there are 4 players having problem with the 5th, there's probably actually something wrong. And what's probably wrong is either the player is behaving badly and you're just not noticing it, or, and I think this is more likely what's probably going on, those 4 are really tight. They're really gelling well. They're meshing well. They're having great chemistry. And then you have this one kind of odd duck who just isn't fitting in, and they kind of grate on their nerves, and the others feel like they're getting drugged down or slowed down, or it's like the fun is being kind of like sucked out of it by this other person who just doesn't fit in. That is a hard situation because I personally love to make everyone feel included, and I love it when other people make other people feel included. So that kind of is almost like a click. Like when a click develops, I think that is so hard for me because what I want to do is see everybody working together and being friends together. So when cliques form and people get like left out, this is very hard for me. There's an element of me that says it might be better if that player like moves to another game or something. It is possible that it will just sort itself out. You might even say something to the other players like, look, guys, let's call a spade here. You know, you are all obviously super tight. I know that Timmy over here, little Timmy, And little D&D Timmy is he's not as cool as you. Like I know that you feel like I know that you feel a certain kind of way, but here's what I would ask. Can are you willing to at least, try to play play nice? Will you please? Like for me. Or is it just not going to work? Is it just, is this little Timmy just ruining it for you? Because that's fair too. If one person is ruining the game for other people, even if they're not doing anything wrong, then there's an element of community protection that you need to deploy as a game master, because even if they're not doing anything wrong, there is such a thing as a conversation of, look, you're not a bad person, you haven't broken any rules, personally I think you're awesome, but everyone else, they're just not jamming with you. It is getting weird, and unfortunately, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, my friend. I don't think this is the community for you. I think that is probably one of the hardest situations I could ever face as a GM. It would be so much easier for me to face an actual problem player than a player who isn't trying to cause problems, but they're out of place because of a click. But at the same time, humans arrange themselves as they're going to arrange themselves, and there's an element of clicks that are natural. Even chimpanzees have clicks, right? And they're some of our closest primate relatives. So this is a very deep human behavior thing that happens. Um, Sakis says, let's see. Sakis says, in my last campaign, I learned to ignore it. Others did not, and it died at session 8. Yeah. If you do not protect your community, there's always a risk that your community will implode. And sometimes that means curating the right people in the community, and then paying attention to how the energy works. And sometimes outsiders who are kind of just taken away from the energy, sometimes you can't afford it, even if they're not doing anything wrong. And that is so hard. That's so hard. It breaks my heart when something like that happens, because it feels so exclusionary. But sometimes if your goal is to actually run a functioning, sustainable table, sometimes you have to do that. If your goal is to just be friends with everyone and never exclude anyone, here's what's going to happen. If you're going to get maybe some people in your group who the others don't jive with, and that tight group is going to say, man, we don't need to put up with this. And they're going to all leave. So most of your players are going to leave, and they're going to go find another GM who'll just play with them. And then you're just going to be friends with the people who, your players are going to be the people who nobody wants to play with. Oh God, that's hard to say, man. That is hard for me to even talk about, but that is the truth. That will happen sometimes. And do you know where I learned that? I learned that back in my party days, man. I used to throw these wild house parties back in my 20s. And there was a name for it. We would call these people corner sitters. In every party, there's a corner where all the sad people gather and mope because they're not popular, and they're resentful of everyone else at the party having fun. And you can always say, ugh, and you got to watch it, because if you let the corner mopers keep coming back to your parties, they're going to bring down all the energy, and all the cool people are going to leave and go party somewhere else. And you're going to have a whole party of just corner mopers. And boy, let me tell you, that's a sad party. Nobody wants to come to that party. And then you're just going to stop throwing parties, because you're going to be like, what's the point, man? Everyone who comes here is just sad and pathetic. Like, that's how you're going to feel, right? I hate, man, it's one of the hard things about humans, but there's an element to where some humans are just intent on being, they're just, it seems like their destiny is not to get along with the cool kids. It is what it is, man. So there you go, Sakis. Oh, rough, rough, rough. I don't like it, but it is what it is. There's the answer. This is my answer. Yeah, man, feels icky to even talk about that, because I love people. I want people to be included. And when I see someone sit in the corner sad, what I want to say is, friend, oh, come on, get up, have some fun, put a smile on your face, go mingle, go, experiment with how to get good reactions from people and how to be more personable. Put yourself out there, take charge of your social destiny, right? These are things that I want to say to people. And I have in the past said this to friends and stuff, but because you want them to be liked and accepted. Sometimes it is just not in the cards, my friend. Sometimes it's not in the cards, and that's not your fault either. You're just trying to run a game of D&D. He's trying to get people to get together and have a good time and minimize complications, right? So it's a little complicated. Ugh, rough. If you haven't joined the GM Philosophy Discord, link is in the description. You should join. We are over 600 GM strong. Excuse me. We're over 600 GM strong. Empowering Game Masters run better games. Now, I have 2 private groups I've started these are free to join, but they are private. So you have to message me if you want to join them. But I've started a health and wellness group where we're going to be talking about like sharing updates every day. Like, for example, I'm beginning to go on a weight loss journey. My scale is coming today. I'm going to start posting my daily progress in there. If you guys want to share if you have health goals, a lot of times Game Masters, that lifestyle can lend itself to having difficult. Actually, no description has been added to this video. Oh no, there is no description in this video. I must have forgot. Well, any other video on my channel will have the links to that stuff in it. So my bad. I didn't put that in here. But anyway, any other, and I even think you can find a link to it in the description of the YouTube channel. But anyway, no, you're right. I forgot to put the links in there. So whoops. Anyway, but if you have health and wellness goals, sometimes I think Game Masters, we have a pretty sedentary lifestyle. Sometimes it can be very unhealthy. I've done some videos about this. I really have a place in my heart developing to want to help Game Masters like get in better shape and be healthier and be more fit. So if you want to join our health and fitness private group, just join the Discord and message me. And like Garrick said, the link is not in the description. So just go to any other video and click the Discord link and you can join. I also have a mental wellness support group. And by the way, this is not like a counseling group, a psychology group or anything, but this is a place where we're going to share updates about mental wellness, mental health. For example, every day I've been trying to post kind of the mental things I'm dealing with, like kind of like an update, how I'm doing with them. And then if we have goals, like maybe you have a goal, you want to be happier. Maybe you want to be 10% happier this year. Maybe you're dealing with a little depression. It would help to talk to some supportive people, whatever it is, right? Maybe going through a hard time. You'd like to just get it off your chest and talk to people who are there to listen. That's what this channel is kind of for. So if you want to be in that channel, just private message me on the Discord and I'll add you. No cost or anything. It's just, these are initiatives that I want to start because I want to help Game Masters, like literally empower them to run better games. But if we want to run better games, guys, we need to have our health right. We got to be dialed in on our health and wellness. We got to be dialed in mentally and psychologically. We got to be dialed in with our mental health. If we're not, those are very foundational. How are we going to run the best games possible? How are we going to build a pro game business? How are we going to run the best games for friends and family if we're not okay in all those areas, right? So this is very, very important. Anyway, so those are things that I am just trying to share with people. How long till GM Matchmaker? I don't know. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe I'll start a GM matchmaking service. Do you mean like dating, like dating for GMs? Maybe wouldn't be a bad criteria to date by. I was like saying, I want to date someone who also plays D&D. This is very important to me. I don't know. The Discord wouldn't be a bad place to be looking. I don't know. Maybe not. But it is hard, though, because it's people all over the world. And usually dating happens locally, right? I think it's better. I'm a no-go on the long-distance relationships. It's like, no, I'm sorry. Like, I live in Springfield, Missouri. There are 100,000 people here. There are some pretty cool people I can date here. I'm not dating somebody halfway across the country. If you ever move to Springfield, hit me up. That's how I feel about it. Anyway, because I want to be close by. I want to be able to see them and actually go out to dinner with them and hold their hand and stuff, right? Now, this is very important to me. Okay, so with all that being said, I am happy that this got talked about. I think that there were some great questions that prompted some great further, deeper communication about this. And I really appreciate everyone contributing and being a part of this. I really want to raise awareness about this. I think that Game Masters should understand that this is a part of the process, and it's a part of the process we should be thoughtful about, like the emotional communication with our players, the strategic communication, the stat based, game mechanics communication. All of it is important. I think that players should speak up. I want players to speak up. I would so much rather hear what they're dealing with and be able to work through it with them than them not bring it up. And so it's very important. I want them to say it. But if we're going to say that as game masters, then we need to set time aside and set intention aside to talk to players, have those conversations with them. This is very important. And I think that it's very important that we do that. All right. With that being said, guys, that's going to bring this live stream to a close. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of GM Philosophy in the Afternoon. Empowering Game Masters to run better games is the goal. Roll some D100s for me at your next game, guys, and I will see you on the next one.